Shalom, shalom, guys. I've got kind of a cool thing for you today. A couple stories, but also just a great illustration that will help put together some pieces for understanding the differences between monogamy and polygyny and understanding maybe some of the process to get there and what it takes and maybe some other things with regards to why Adam only had Hava. So that's a good one. All right, let's buckle up, take a look at this. Roll the intro. Okay, guys, I've got to tell you that since I was a child, I have always loved airplanes. I literally grew up in South America. Now, I was 3 years old at the time that my parents moved to the jungles of Colombia, South America. Entonces, puedo hablar español. But I lived down there from the age of 3 until the age of 9 or 10. I was there about 6 or 6.5 years. We lived in the jungle. Daddy was a bush pilot. And so from the time I was a little boy, I have always just loved airplanes. And I can remember, even as a 5 or 6 year old riding, it wouldn't be shotgun, it'd be, co-pilot with Dad going somewhere. He's taking that plane somewhere, having the opportunity to hold the stick and that kind of thing. Just cool stuff. Also understand very clearly the dangers. I can remember, for example, my dad relaying to me years later that I almost wasn't, from the perspective that while I was probably at the age of 2.5 or 3, I was flying with him somewhere. We were still down in Miami-Dade County, Florida. He was getting his additional ratings, instruments, and multi-engine, and some of the other things that he had as additional ratings. And we were flying somewhere in a little single engine, probably like a Cessna 182 or a 172 or 170, something like that. And all of a sudden, everything cut out. The engine stopped. And everything was done, just like that. And so immediately he sets the glide slope, sets the flaps, and starts going through the checklist to figure out what in the world went wrong because the engine just stopped, sputtered and stopped. And after he runs through the checklist, cool head, running down through it, one of the things that he gets to is make sure that the fuel settings are correct on which tank is feeding. And it turns out that I had reached over there and turned off the fuel, and the engine had sputtered to a stop. That's what happens when you don't put fuel in there, right? And so he fixed that and managed to get the engine started back up and land us, and good lesson for everybody. But 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old riding in the plane. Keep your fingers, your hands to yourself, right? I was just all over the place. I can remember other stories. I remember one time he tells a story of having to fly an ocelot, which is a very small but extremely hyper and like Tasmanian devilish cat. It was a wild ocelot that was in a cage that he had to fly from one place to another in South America for whatever reason. I don't remember. And he was tooling along at about 4,000 or 5,000 feet of elevation. And he said all of a sudden something happened in the back of the plane, and the ocelot got out of the cage, was revived from the anesthesia or whatever it had. I don't know those details of the story now. But all of a sudden, the ocelot was around the inside of the plane going bananas. And it'll tear somebody up. It'll tear something up. It was major, major danger. So he just opened the door of the plane. The ocelot comes across the inside and right out the door, and there she went. But that's bush pilot life, right? So it was of special interest to me recently when one of my patrons contacted me and said, "Hey, Pete, I've got an illustration. My brother and I were talking about marriage, biblical marriage. We were talking about a lot of different details and things. And he said something, and then we put together a little bit of a thought process that I think you'll be interested in. And he relayed it to me, and I went, wow, that makes great sense. And so I want to share a little bit with you. Now, right now in the background here, we've got a neat little LearJet sailing down the runway and heading for takeoff. Just collected a couple different pieces of video clips off of YouTube so I could put together a little bit of an illustration here. But everything when I was a child, everything that we did was in a little single engine or occasionally a very small multi-engine airplane. I'm not sure, apart from commercial airlines, that I've ever been in a small jet of that sort. But the illustration begins with the fact that marriage requires a lot of inputs and balancing a few things very carefully. And it's not unlike an airplane engine that requires a certain amount of fuel and air, and it's all got to be tuned in such a way to provide maximum performance. If you've got too much air or too much fuel, either one can lead to choking or cutting out. Another issue, very simply, is being able to control carb heat as you grow, go up in elevation. That can become a problem with particularly a piston engine, not so much, I don't think, with a jet engine. But the bottom line is there are multiple things going into making that single engine run properly. And in doing so, in making that happen, the pilot has to constantly be monitoring what's going on, constantly keeping an eye on what's going on the in the cockpit and on the panel. Even more so if the pilot has a jet engine. Many more factors to be working with. And so to begin with, there's kind of, as you're dealing with a more and more significant or finely tuned aircraft, the more important all the different pieces parts are. But there's also another illustration that goes with this, and that is with a small airplane like we have here in the background. Typically, this is what you would learn to fly in. You're going to typically start with it might be a low wing, but more often than not, a high wing, single engine airplane. Old back in the day, it would have been a Piper Cub or something of that sort, or a Cessna 150 or 152. Were there 152s? And then I know Cessna 170s and 180s. In that range. Fairly small airplane, right? Because it's manageable. It's not that complicated. It's easier than flying a jet, right? And so, a pilot would, if he were learning, a student pilot would take some ground school courses, would learn a little bit that way, and then would go up with an instructor and eventually have the opportunity to go solo, right? And then once soloing, be able to practice doing landings and touch and goes and takeoffs and all of this, but doing it all in a very simple airplane initially. Nobody starts in a LearJet. So to take the illustration a little bit further, when we look at this, that airplane or the instructor has to be rated or needs to be rated higher than the level that he's teaching in most cases. I know that if you were learning about marriage, you wouldn't go ask somebody who's never been married. Just like if you wanted to learn how to fly, you wouldn't go ask someone who's never been a pilot. But if you're going to learn how to fly and you want to go out to the airfield, you're probably not going to go out there with somebody who just got their license or is still soloing so that they can show you how to get around the patch, right? Instead, you want to go find a flight instructor, maybe somebody who's got 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 hours of stick time, 5,000 hours of stick time. You want to find a pilot that's got a whole bunch of time behind the stick, right? That's what you're looking for. And then before, you start taking those lessons, before you move up, you need some experience. See, there are a whole lot of people who think that marriage is, well, that's no problem. Piece of cake. I can jump from nothing to 2, 3, 4 wives. No problem. This is easy. I read a book one time, right? And there are plenty of people that have been married for 2 or 3 years and think they've got the whole marriage thing licked, and then they want to go tell other people how to operate a marriage. One of the things in our patron, especially, we've got a number of men, especially the leaders, that have been married for years and years and years and have a lot of experience and can give good marriage counsel. But then also, I don't necessarily go to those men asking how I would operate a multi-engine aircraft, right? Instead, I've got friends that have been married with multiple wives for years. Now, to go back to the patron's illustration, talking about jets and jet engines is, that's a good word right there, right? Look at all that. Look at that instrument panel. That's the inside of a LearJet, right? That's a whole lot of stuff to be paying attention to, right? And he's getting ready to fire up engine number 1 from the, I think he was flying as the co-pilot, but given a POV for how he did the whole thing. But the point is that, 2 engines, particularly jet engines, all of a sudden you can start looking at a lot more altitude, a lot more speed, a lot more distance. Same thing with building a family. Financially, economically, everything else, you can do a lot more. There's a lot more that can be done with having a family that has multiple wives. But that's not where a person should start. Making your first move is having a LearJet is probably a great way to crash and lose a whole bunch in the process, if not your life, right? Rather, anybody who flies a LearJet started in a little Cessna 150 or 170, 180, Piper Cub, something very simple. And then they practiced, and then they moved up into to get their instrument flight rating, and then move up to where they can get a multi-engine flight rating, and then start working on additional things, because everything happens faster in a jet. Lots more parameters to watch in a jet. Lots more things to learn with a jet, because you're going from 0 to, in this case, probably about 450 knots. I'm not sure exactly what a LearJet would cruise at, but I'm going to say that it's probably in the 400 knot range, right? Where a little Piper Cub, you might cruise along at 110 or 115. I'm not sure. And then you can slow fly it down into 60 or 50 miles an hour, depending on 40, 50 knots, depending on where what your load is, and altitude and elevation, and some of these distance above sea level kind of thing, air density. These things play into it. But all of that gets complicated and compounded when you start flying a Learjet, because everything happens even more complex. And that's the thing with polygyny. A lot of people want to think, polygyny, go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, no problem. I've actually heard that going from 2 to 3 is easier than going from 1 to 2. That's the big leap, right? Here's the point. Here's the point that I want to make, because it's so easy for people to take a look at it and think, piece of cake, no problem. It's also easy for people to think, I don't need somebody else that can help me, or somebody else that can walk with me. When in fact, that's completely false. It's completely false. I can tell you, for a number of years, my wife Kelly and I had been associating with and fellowshipping with and learning from multiple polygynous families, a couple of which have more than 30 years of polygyny under their belt. Wise men who have walked a long time, strong believers, great families. They have the fruit to show. And that was where we learned a lot of the things that we needed to learn, and things that we impart now in our patron. And I would invite you, certainly. If you are interested in learning more with regards to authority and headship, family structure, if you're looking for more information on marriage, if you're looking for more information on the roles of men and women in marriage, if you're looking for more information with regards to biblical marriage and polygyny, I strongly recommend that you subscribe, like, share, help the algorithms on this channel. But then if you really want to get into it and have conversation with other people who are learning and growing and seeking and, seeking to understand and are graduating from a single engine toward a multi-engine rating and moving from piston to jet, you need to be in our Patreon. You need to come be a participant at least at the $5 a month level, which gives you the ability to access all of our Telegram groups. Because that's where you can really learn a lot. You can ask questions, you can hear conversations, you can chime in, you can watch and read as other men and as other women discuss what they're going through, what they're learning, what they're understanding, all these pieces, because it fits together. Now, something that I mentioned at the very beginning is maybe why did Adam have only Chava? See, everybody wants to look at what happened in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, and say, see, that's the ideal. The ideal is that everybody have a Piper Cub. Everybody can only handle one engine and can only handle one, a small, slow-moving airplane. Maybe really what was going on there, I can tell you that God's not setting a standard or an ideal, because he very clearly later on gives regulation for how to manage a multi-wife household. But maybe what was really going on is the Most High looked at Adam and said, I'm going to start you off with one, because that's where you learn and grow and learn how to handle one engine before, in fact, watching that takeoff, it looked like he popped up off the ground just a shade too early, and he had to stay on ground effect a little bit to kind of get the speed up before he could start climbing out, right? You could back up and look at that. But here's the point. I don't think the Most High was going to start Adam off with the LearJet. It stands to reason that he started Adam with one wife because experience is necessary. Learn, grow, become a leader in a house of one, and then be prepared to move on to a house of two or three, right? So I wanted to share that illustration with you. I hope it's something that will bless you. I hope it's something that you can take and glean some additional truths out of. If you come up with some stuff, put it down in the chats. Would love to have, see in the comments what other thoughts you have with regards to the difference between flying single engine and flying multi-engine, between having one woman and having two or three, right? Because the differences are significant. And when things go sideways, they go sideways faster with a multi-engine airplane than they do with a single. And there's so many ways that you can mess things up, so many more ways you can mess things up with a multi-engine than you can mess them up with a single engine, right? So anyway, I want to put that out there, give you something to chew on. Hope you enjoy it. Hope the background, it's a lot of motion, but it's fun to watch this stuff. I just love airplanes. And so this looped clip behind me with so many cool things. I didn't use the whole clip that I could have put together, but really cool. Anyway, I bless you guys. I pray that the time come. We know that Isaiah chapter 4, verses 1 and following say the time will come when there will be a lot of men flying LearJets, if you know what I mean, right? A lot of men. But to get there, we've got to get the experience, we've got to get the know-how, we've got to learn, we've got to grow, and be able to handle what the Father's placing in our hands and in our laps. And I pray the Most High will bless you with that in His timing, not in ours or your timing, my timing, whatever. Instead, that we wait upon Him and let Him bring those things to fruition. So, for King and Kingdom, I bid you shalom.